Ashworth Keep was a monument to flawless, freezing respectability, and tonight, Lady Serena Aldridge planned to become its mistress. But as she stood at the leaded glass window, gazing out at the remote crags where the mist coiled like a living, sinister thing, she did not see a future of honor. She saw only the shadow of her past, lurking in the approaching night, threatening to emerge and tear down the careful life she had built. She had promised the world she was tamed, but she knew, with a sick certainty, that some fires only banked. They never truly died. Part 1. The Promise of Safety. Lady Serena Aldridge was accustomed to the cold beauty of safety. It draped itself over her like the Duke of Ashworth's ancestral silver fox shawl, heavy, luxurious, and entirely devoid of warmth. The Duke's country seat, Ashworth Keep, was a monument to this security. It was not a cheerful, sun-drenched estate, but a granite fortress of reputation, seated upon a wild, mist-haunted crag in the remote north. Tonight the air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation, for the Duke, His Grace Charles Beaumont, the 10th Duke of Ashworth, was expected to make his proposal. Serena stood by the vast leaded glass window in the drawing room, her fingers tracing the chill of the pane. Below, the manicured gardens dropped away into a dense, whispering wood that felt ancient and secretive. It was the perfect setting for a woman determined to bury her history. She was 23, exquisitely beautiful, and now impeccably positioned. 3 seasons of careful conduct, of silence over the wrong topics, and of cultivated coolness had transformed her from the scandalous Miss Aldridge, the girl who had dared to dream of a life outside the London cage, into the poised, potential Duchess. The transformation had been costly, requiring the systematic excision of her younger, more passionate self. The Duke represented the final seal on her respectable rebirth. He was everything society required: steady, honorable, immensely wealthy, and possessing a reputation so unblemished it was almost clinical. When she accepted his proposal, and she would accept, the world would forget the disastrous, reckless year she had spent living on the fringes of acceptable society, the year that had almost cost her and her family everything. She would be safe. She heard the door open, but it was not Charles. "Serena, my dear, are you quite certain of this?" It was her aunt, Lady Beatrice Aldridge, a woman whose every line and wrinkle was a testament to the anxious burden of social maintenance. Serena turned, offering a serene, practiced smile. "Of course, Aunt. Charles is entirely suitable. He is dependable." "Dependable," Lady Beatrice echoed, her voice thin with relief and a lingering, nervous terror. "Yes, exactly. A rock. No more of that melodrama, Serena. It nearly destroyed us. The Duke is salvation. He is the quiet life." The quiet life. That was the price. A life where the beating of her own heart was the loudest, most dangerous noise. She heard the door open, but it was not Charles. "Serena, my dear, are you quite certain of this?" It was her aunt, Lady Beatrice Aldridge, a woman whose every line and wrinkle was a testament to the anxious burden of social maintenance. Serena turned, offering a serene, practiced smile. "Of course, Aunt. Charles is entirely suitable. He is dependable." "Dependable," Lady Beatrice echoed, her voice thin with relief and a lingering, nervous terror. "Yes, exactly. A rock. No more of that melodrama, Serena. It nearly destroyed us. The Duke is salvation. He is the quiet life." The quiet life. That was the price. A life where the beating of her own heart was the loudest, most dangerous noise. "He is a gentleman who will look after my future," Serena confirmed, her eyes fixed on her reflection in the glass. The woman looking back was a masterpiece of restraint. The dinner that evening was an excruciatingly correct affair. The Duke, a man of precise habits and predictable conversation, spoke of estate matters, of the poor harvest in the south, and of his plans for the new wing of the village school. He was kind, if reserved, and treated her with a formal deference that was a balm to her ruined nerves. It was during the third course, a perfectly roasted pheasant, that the unexpected happened. A footman approached the Duke, whispering an apology.
"A visitor, Your Grace, unannounced. A gentleman, sir, who claims a commission with your latest art acquisition. He insisted that the work requires his personal attention tonight." The Duke frowned, a faint disturbance in his habitually calm features. "Insolent fellow! Send him to the East Wing Gallery, then. He may wait for me there until morning. I will not have my evening interrupted." "But, Your Grace," the footman hesitated, his eyes wide. "He is already here. He refused to wait." Serena felt a prickle of unease. Such an intrusion was unheard of in the Duke's highly regulated world. The dining-room doors were pushed open before the Duke could issue a reprimand, and into the incandescent glow of the chandelier stepped a man who seemed to drag the shadows in with him. He was dressed in clothes of quality, but they were not the stiff, impeccable garments of the ton. They were the practical, travel-stained attire of a man whose focus was not appearance, but purpose. His face was all sharp angles and rough-hewn intensity, framed by dark hair that refused to lie properly, and his eyes, those eyes were the color of storm-tossed slate, and they fixed instantly on Serena. Her breath hitched, a tiny internal gasp that felt like a physical pain. The delicate glass of security she had built around herself shattered into 1,000 pieces. It was Julian Vane, the brooding, mysterious artist, the man who once saw the girl, not the Duchess, the man who had painted her not in a demure portrait, but in the reckless, vibrant hues of a life lived dangerously, the man who knew every raw, unforgivable detail of the scandal she had come here to erase.
Julian stopped just inside the room, an almost predatory stillness about him. His glance swept over the Duke and the glittering silver, then returned, relentlessly, to Serena. "Julian Vane, at your service, Your Grace," he said, his voice a low, rough baritone that resonated with a memory she had desperately tried to silence. The Duke rose, his expression frigid. "Mr. Vane, this is an extraordinary breach of etiquette. I trust your business is urgent." Julian offered a careless, almost insolent bow. "Extremely, Your Grace. It concerns the integrity of your collection, and a certain truth that may or may not require disclosure. I find the light in the gallery quite insufficient for my assessment." He paused, and his lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile, the smile that had once been her undoing. "And I also find myself in the company of a familiar face, Lady Serena Aldridge." His emphasis on her name was a deliberate violation, an intimate recognition that stripped the years away. To everyone else, he was a demanding tradesman. To Serena, he was a sudden dark tide rushing in, threatening to drown the fragile safety of her present in the compelling, raw passion of her past. She felt the blush rise, hot and painful, and she gripped the stem of her wineglass, afraid that her hand would shake. The Duke's attention shifted between the unwelcome artist and his intended duchess, an embryonic suspicion beginning to cloud his calm eyes. The past had not merely resurfaced, it had arrived on the doorstep of her salvation, cloaked in danger and the compelling promise of a love she had sworn to deny. The fortress of Ashworth Keep had a breach, and Julian Vane was standing right in it. Part 2. The Two Worlds Collide. The days that followed Julian Vane's audacious arrival at Ashworth Keep were a masterpiece of social agony for Lady Serena. The Duke, ever the master of decorum, masked his annoyance at the artist's continued presence with meticulous politeness. He insisted Julian complete his restoration work under the most exacting scrutiny, but the sheer length of the task and Julian's vague, artistic pronouncements about the need for specific light and uninterrupted contemplation meant he was effectively a resident, a shadow resident, haunting the edges of Serena's safe world. Ashworth Keep became a battleground for Serena's soul. The Duke, Charles Beaumont, was a beacon of safety, duty, and social acceptance. He courted Serena with gifts of precisely chosen pearls and signed treaties with her relatives regarding her dowry and future settlements. His affection was a comfortable, well-upholstered room. It offered protection, but no air for high flight. Julian Vane, conversely, represented truth, dangerous passion, and the threat of ruin. He was a constant, unsettling presence. During the day, he could be found in the chilly East Wing gallery, his back to the door, sketching intently, a dark, dynamic figure in the rigid landscape of the keep. Yet his awareness of Serena was palpable, a silent current flowing between them that made her nerves sing and her skin prickle. One crisp afternoon, the Duke led Serena through the gardens, outlining his plans for their life. "The season will be concluded properly, of course," Charles said, adjusting his cuff with a neat precision that bespoke his nature. "Then we shall retreat here for the late autumn. You will manage the domestic affairs with my housekeeper, a wonderfully dependable woman. No surprises, Serena. That is the essence of a good life." "No surprises," she repeated faintly, feeling the weight of the gilded cage settling around her. Just then, they passed a stone wall where Julian was standing, sketching the wilder, overgrown view of the woods. He looked up, his slate eyes catching hers, and the intensity in them was a physical jolt. He didn't speak a word to her, but addressed the Duke instead. "Your Grace, I find the composition of your life fascinating. All straight lines and right angles. There is no truth in straight lines. They exist only in man's mind, not in nature." The Duke stiffened. "I prefer order, Mr. Vane. Disorder is merely the excuse of the indolent." "Or the brave, Your Grace," Julian countered, a slow, intimate smile playing on his lips, though his gaze was fixed solely on Serena. "Sometimes disorder is merely passion, and that is a far more honest state than your studied tranquility." Serena felt the heat in Julian's words. He wasn't arguing about art. He was arguing for her heart, right in front of the man who would pay for her future. The Duke was oblivious, viewing Julian as a talented but impertinent tradesman. But Serena understood. Julian was challenging her to remember the girl who prized honesty above tranquility. The tension built in late-night encounters and forbidden exchanges. One evening, Serena found herself alone in the vast library, searching for a book to calm her racing mind. The tall, heavy French doors leading to the deserted terrace stood ajar. A hand reached out from the gloom and gently closed the door. She spun around, a gasp dying in her throat. Serena. Julian Vane emerged from the shadows of the terrace, his face etched with a desperate, familiar longing. He had no business being here, Yet he was exactly where he belonged, in the darkest corner of his respectable life. You must leave, Julian. If Charles finds you, I will be ruined.
You are already ruined, my dear, he murmured, stepping closer, his presence a dark warmth that contrasted sharply with the keep's cold stone. You simply haven't accepted it yet. You're marrying a mausoleum. I am marrying safety, something you know nothing about. I know you, he countered, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper. He lifted his hand and she instinctively flinched, remembering the reckless freedom of his touch. But he merely held out a folded piece of parchment, an aching glance, a hidden letter. She snatched it away, her fingers brushing his, and the brief contact sent a jolt of fire through her. The paper has been left blank, he said, his eyes glittering in the moonlight. I thought it best to let your own words from the past speak for themselves. The ones you wrote to me. The ones she wrote to him, reckless, passionate letters penned during that wild, scandalous year. Letters that, if revealed, would destroy the fragile peace she had bought with 3 years of painful restraint. You kept them, she whispered, aghast. I kept everything, he said, simply. I kept the memory of the woman who would rather starve with a full heart than dine sumptuously on duty alone. Does he know you, Serena? Does he know the fire he is trying to smother? It is not his concern. And it is no longer yours. Everything about you is my concern, he said, leaning close, his breath warm against her ear. I have only to show him one sketch from that time, one letter, and this entire sterile life you are building will crumble. Why are you here, Julian? To destroy me? He shook his head, a gesture of profound, tormented denial. To save you, from yourself. I see the light dying in your eyes, Serena. You cannot do this. I must. Before she could retreat, he captured her face in his hands, a touch of raw, immediate passion that stole her breath and shattered her resolve. His lips found hers in a kiss that was a promise, a condemnation, and a desperate plea, all at once. It was a searing moment of truth, a violent reminder of the passion she had forsaken. When he pulled back, his eyes were full of a hungry, aching yearning. Tell me I mean nothing. Tell me you do not remember. Serena could only stare, breathless, the lie frozen on her tongue. He retreated back into the darkness, leaving her alone with the damning blank paper in her hand and the ghost of his kiss on her lips. The truth of Serena's past was exposed not by Julian, but by the watchful eyes of the Duke's family. The Duke's sister, Lady Eleanor, a woman as cold and severe as the keep itself, had been suspicious of Serena's perfect composure, and she had ordered an investigation into Serena's abrupt disappearance from London society 3 years prior. The climax occurred during a luncheon meant to formalize the final details of the engagement. The room was tense, thick with the scent of lilies and impending wealth. Lady Eleanor cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the polite chatter like glass. Serena, my dear, we have received some disturbing information regarding your brief residence in Italy a few years ago. Specifically, the matter of the unfortunate debt and the disappearance of the family jewels. Serena froze. The jewel theft, an act committed by a desperate man she was trying to protect, a consequence of the reckless company she had kept during her time away from society, was the darkest, most ruinous secret. She had repaid the debt, but the scandal had never been forgotten. The Duke's face was an expressionless mask, but his eyes were sharp with controlled fury. Serena, is there something you have not been entirely forthcoming about? Serena's polished facade crumbled. The need to lie had been exhausted. The passion of the night before had stripped her of the energy for pretense. I made a grave error in judgment, Charles. I was foolish and naive. It was a debt incurred under duress, and it was repaid in full. But yes, the rumors of my association with the wrong sort of people are true. The wrong sort of people? The Duke's voice was dangerously quiet. We have proof, Lady Serena, that you were not merely associated with a group of bohemian artists and opportunists. You were living in a common dwelling under the assumed name of Miss Thorne, and were involved in the dispersal of family property. This is not just youthful indiscretion. This is a moral deficiency. My family's name cannot be tethered to such ruin. The Duke, forced to choose between his honor and his love, chose his honor. The quiet constraints of his nature were now fully visible. His priority was reputation, not the woman standing before him. Just as Lady Eleanor was about to deliver the final, crushing condemnation, the door opened. Julian Vane stepped forward. He wasn't wearing his artist's smock, but a dark, elegant coat, and he carried a quiet, fierce authority that silenced the room. He walked to Serena, his steps decisive, ignoring the outraged gasp of Lady Eleanor. He didn't offer a polite excuse or a defense. He simply claimed her. He took her hand, not gently, but possessively, his thumb drawing a bold, burning line across her knuckles. Your Grace, you misunderstand the nature of this particular ruin, Julian said, his voice ringing with conviction. Lady Serena was living in Italy, yes, and she was associating with artists, yes. She was seeking truth and honesty in a world that you clearly find unseemly. The debt was a terrible burden, and it was I who helped her carry it. And it was I who painted her portrait during that time, a portrait that is testament to her extraordinary courage, not her shame. He looked down at Serena, his eyes blazing. I did not come here to destroy her. I came here to claim her. He addressed the Duke with a defiant finality. Lady Serena Aldridge is not available to you, Your Grace. She is already claimed. I was the dangerous passion, and I am the truth, and I take her now, with all her mess and all her fire. The Duke paled, scandalized by the declaration. Julian, without a backward glance, tugged Serena's hand, leading her out of the glittering, suffocating room, away from the Duke and the life of safety, and straight into the waiting, dangerous fire of their destiny. Part 3. Abandoning the Light. The flight from Ashworth Keep was a breathtaking plunge from the cold security of duty into the wild, exhilarating uncertainty of fate. Julian pulled Serena through the grand, echoing halls, their footsteps loud and scandalous against the marble floors. He did not pause for discussion or debate. He acted with the fierce, possessive certainty of a man who knew precisely what he was rescuing. Outside, the mist was rolling in from the crags, shrouding the granite fortress in a fitting veil of gloom. A simple, sturdy carriage waited, pulled by 2 powerful horses. Serena was breathless, not from the speed of their escape, but from the realization of what she was sacrificing. She was abandoning the light, the security, the title, the comfort, for the dark, exhilarating mess of truth. Julian, stop, she finally managed, pulling her hand free just as they reached the carriage door. He turned, his eyes searching hers, his expression taut with a mixture of hope and fear. You have a choice, Serena. The carriage is waiting. You can step inside, or you can walk back to the Duke and his promise of a life devoid of risk. She looked back at the keep. She saw the heavy, unforgiving architecture,
the small figures rushing to the windows to witness the scandal, and she imagined the life that awaited her there, polite, predictable, and utterly joyless. She would be Mrs. Beaumont, Duchess of Ashworth, a woman with a perfected exterior and a hollow heart. The Duke had exposed his true, constrained nature in that dining room. He had prioritized the sanctity of his name over the defense of the woman he professed to love. He saw her past as a stain to be scrubbed away, not a part of the person he was meant to cherish. Serena turned back to Julian, her eyes stinging with a powerful, freeing grief. "I choose the fire," she whispered, the words shaking with a conviction that had been absent for 3 long years. "I choose the ruin, Julian. I choose you." A look of profound relief and triumph washed over Julian's face. He captured her, not in a polite embrace, but in a fierce, binding hold that felt like coming home. He lifted her into the carriage. "You have chosen truth, Serena." He slammed the carriage door shut behind them and climbed in beside her. He took the reins himself, sending the horses plunging forward into the gathering mist. And truth is a far harder mistress than any duke. The journey was long, and in the confines of the carriage, Serena faced the full, terrifying reality of her decision. "London will close its doors to me," she stated, her voice trembling but steady. "I will be a pariah. My aunt and uncle will disown me. The Duke will make sure my reputation is not merely tarnished, but destroyed beyond repair." Julian listened patiently, his gaze fixed on the road, yet entirely attuned to her fear. "Yes," he agreed, brutally honest. "The Duchess of Ashworth you will never be. You will be Lady Serena Aldridge, the woman who abandoned honor for an artist. The doors of polite society will slam shut, so loudly the echoes will follow us for years. You will lose everything you painstakingly built." "And you?" she challenged, needing to know the depth of his sacrifice. "I lose the commission, the money, and any chance of painting portraits for the aristocracy," Julian admitted with a shrug. "I was already halfway outside their doors. Now I am merely on the wrong side of the fence entirely. But I gain the only patron I ever truly desired. You, Serena." He stopped the carriage suddenly, pulling them off the main road and into the shelter of a dense copse of ancient oaks. He turned, facing her fully, and took both of her hands in his. "This is what I offer you," he said, his voice dropping to a passionate rasp. "No grand titles, no security that can be bought with money, and no polite lies. I offer you an unconventional, passionate, and real love. I offer you a life lived outside their stifling rules. We will retreat to the only place I can afford to keep, a small, decaying coastal cottage in Cornwall, far from the malicious tongues of Mayfair. It is wild, it is honest, and it is poor. It is our Gothic love, Serena. It is messy, but it is ours." He looked into her eyes, his intensity a physical force. "Do you regret the Duke's security now that you face the poverty of my love?" Serena closed her eyes, letting the truth wash over her. The years of pretense, the cold, suffocating need for approval, it all dissolved. She remembered the fire of their youth, the reckless abandon, and the simple, profound honesty they shared when they had nothing but each other. "I only regret the years I wasted trying to pretend I could be the Duke's wife," she said, opening her eyes. A fierce, exhilarating joy, a joy she thought she had killed, surged through her. "My soul used to be starved, Julian. I choose the wild cottage. I choose the mess. I choose you." Several weeks later, The scandal had faded from the front pages of the London society papers, replaced by a new engagement, but the talk lingered. Lady Serena Aldridge, the girl who almost became a duchess, had chosen social ruin for a penniless painter. Serena and Julian were living in the aforementioned coastal cottage in Cornwall. It was indeed small, decaying, and relentlessly battered by the sea wind, but it was filled with light, truth, and the vibrant chaos of Julian's work. Serena, now simply Mrs. Vane, had traded silk and silver for wool and the smell of paint and sea salt. She found a profound, simple satisfaction in managing their tiny household and in the quiet certainty of Julian's presence. One afternoon, she found him in his small, sun-drenched studio, gazing out at the crashing waves. He turned as she entered, holding a canvas under his arm. "I finished the portrait I started 3 years ago, the one I started when we were living in Italy, the one that Lady Eleanor would have found scandalous."
He unveiled the painting. It was not the demure, cool portrait of the intended duchess. It was an image of the girl who sought truth. Her hair was slightly disheveled by the wind, her eyes were burning with a fierce, challenging intelligence, and her lips held the memory of a passionate defiance. It was Serena, unburdened. "It is not scandalous, Julian," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "It is true. It is me." "That is the only truth that matters," he said, setting the painting aside. He took her into his arms, pulling her close against the solid, rough wool of his coat. Their life was unconventional, lived far from the rules and rituals of the London ton. They were poor in coin, but rich in honesty. Their love was born not from fairy tales, but from the fire of shared passion and the undeniable truth of two souls recognizing their home in the other. Serena had lost the world's respect, but in the arms of the passionate artist, she had finally, truly found herself.